Assalamualaikum guys. So on today's episode, we were joined by two very, very special and super awesome guests. Our episode, we kind of, had an awesome back and forth conversation about, race and Arab superiority. It was a very fruitful conversation. Of course, Faizan added his banter here and there, but overall, it was a super amazing conversation, and we hope that you guys enjoy. In today's episode, we're joined by two amazing guests. If you guys want to introduce yourselves,
go for it, Maryam.
Okay, so Assalamu alaikum. My name is Maryam and I'm an incoming second-year science student at Western.
And I'm Zain and I am going into my second year of Teachers College, also at Western.
Amazing.
Awesome. I really want to say thank you for taking the time out to join us. We just wanted to kind of start it off easy by asking you guys what summer has been like, especially with Corona season, and something cool that you guys might have done, something you've learned, or anything you've learned about your families, because I've learned that they're pretty amazing people, because spending a lot of time with them. So
the positive people here.
Yeah. So yeah, what have you guys been up to?
Honestly, I've been doing a lot of just kind of like prep for the upcoming year with MSA and just being not in person for a lot of these things. And one thing that's exciting, actually, there was a couple things. Well, first of all, I've got two pet budgies, and one of them got stuck in a pillar inside my house. So that was an exciting, terrifying time because we had to cut out
your Instagram.
We had to cut out a little like a little doorway at the very bottom of the pillar by not destroying the pillar, but at the same time trying to get him out. And then a month and a half later, we decided to get another pet. So we got a puppy. We named him Twix. So that's the most exciting part of my quarantine summer. What about you, Maryam?
So mine isn't as eventful as yours, unfortunately. I've done like 2 summer courses, trying not to go insane. I talk to my family like every day, see what they're up to, and yeah, it's been okay. I'm pulling through.
Yeah, it must be hard. How was Ramadan, like when you were on your own?
Ramadan was interesting, to say the least. It wasn't actually as bad as I thought it was, because you don't gotta like wake up early just to because I have 4 sisters as well too, so it's like, how do you like try to compose yourself without yelling at them all the time? But like when you're all alone, like you're actually like you're like by yourself. You don't have to like worry about anyone else too, so it was good.
What about you, Randa?
Mine was low-key not that eventful either. I live in the middle of nowhere, if you guys don't know. And so pretty much all around me is just like forest and greenery, which is amazing. It's great for walks. The trails are beautiful. So yeah, I've been spending a lot of time outside and doing my gardening.
How was your summer?
Yeah.
It's good, alhamdulillah. Honestly, I did a summer school course as well, but Ivy, they do it like really early. So my summer school course started mid-April and ended before May even started. So it was like before like the regular summer school started. So I got that done out of the way really quickly. And then Ramadan came. I was just trying to keep busy with like, all those like little things that I do, like the mentorship thing, and then like some other things on the side, this podcast being one of them. And then I've been really sad because the gyms aren't open, and
oh my God, I feel that.
It's been a huge mushkila.
My second home,
literally, yeah. It's like when you escape the family and the drama in the household, or you just had a bad day. All you think is like, I can't wait to get to the gym and just forget all that.
But yeah. So because I couldn't work out, I started off with like body weights and like, like the whole like calisthenics and whatnot. Didn't really like it too much. Then I started running. I liked that. And just recently, actually, I started running with a soccer ball. It sounds really lame.
That's so cute.
But it's good because I couldn't play soccer for an entire year because I got injured. So it's been like being able to kind of get back. But I was going to say, so when I was running the other day, I met an old friend. Okay, and I have 2 things to say about this. One, isn't it crazy when you meet an old friend for such a long time and it's been like 2-3 years. It's just so interesting to see like how different you are now versus when you were then, and how far you've come and how far they've come, and like how different your paths are. It's insane. I know the second thing I wanted to say was, so instead of actually running, I just started chatting with my guy, and we talked for like an hour and a half. And one of the things, so he was talking about his work and whatnot, and he was like, oh, I had to go to Vancouver for like this like work project, not like right now, like in the early this year. He just talked about how Vancouver is so beautiful, yada yada yada. And we just started talking about like life, and he was like, oh, so like where did you grow up? I'm like, oh, I grew up in Dubai, born and raised there. And then just conversation kept going, and I'm like, oh, would you ever go back to Vancouver or potentially live there? And he was like, yeah, maybe, but I really like Mississauga. I'm like, yeah, I like Mississauga too, way better than London. Sorry, girl. and so he was like, oh, would you ever go back and live to Dubai? And I said, maybe, if I wanted to like grind it out and make money, but never to like raise a family. And the reason for that was because in my experience, there was a lot of like systemic like discrimination. And so that's kind of what we wanted to talk about today. So I want to ask you guys if you guys ever, you know, because I think all of us here have at some point in our life lived in the Middle East, have been exposed to that. So we wanted to tailor our topic today to reflect on those experiences and just share your thoughts. So whoever wants to go first.
I lived in Dubai, and so I first started out in Dubai before even coming to Canada, and then switched back around when I was in high school and went back to Dubai for a couple of years. And when I was first living in Dubai, I was very young. I think I only lived there up until 10 years old, but so you don't really notice these things. You don't notice all these kind of issues coming up because, again, like, you're so young, and if it's like a norm, or if you're surrounded by a certain type of individuals that don't really have a problem with it, you don't ever get exposed to the other end of things. But it's when I got back in high school that I started really noticing all these like terrible mentalities, terrible mindsets that people would have and carry. And the bigger worry about it all is that they don't realize how problematic it really is. I remember I was around at the time where there was a law saying that you aren't allowed to, like, so any construction company isn't allowed to have their construction workers on the buildings, like, working from 12 to 3 p.m. because that's like Dhuhr time. It's the hottest, especially in the summer. Like, people legitimately die from heat exhaustion or a heat stroke. So they're like, you gotta, like, you can't do that. And I remember my uncle was working in a company, and he had been looking into different apartment buildings, and one of the buildings was like a communal living situation where, like, you just share an apartment, but then you get in and you see that you have like 4 or 5 people sharing maybe like one room, like, and it's given by their company as accommodation, where it's like, it's genuinely like inhumane. And a lot of them are coming in from a lot of other countries. Like, they're coming in from India, they're coming in from Bangladesh, they're coming in from, and so you see that and you're like, but that's not fair treatment. Like, they're not getting paid enough to be able to live somewhere properly. And then if they're getting accommodated by their companies, like, this is not humane accommodation. Like, you want to treat a human like a human. And so I remember the point where it really like struck a chord with me is that when I was talking about it with my friend, I was telling her, I was like, it's so unfair. Like, they should, like, they're not coming here to be like humiliated, just to be able to, work and provide for their families. And she said, well, no one's forcing them to come here. They chose to come. They can just go back if they don't like it. I'm like, really? Like, is that really like how you think people should feel about that? Like, you shouldn't think that, oh, maybe let's fix the labor issues going on, especially when it's like a very specific, like, it stems from like the idea of, oh, they're coming in from, you tell them about the heat. Well, India's hot, so they're okay with it. I'm like, okay, but really, like, if you've got people dying from heat strokes, like, you really think that it's an okay thing to just say, oh yeah, but like back where they're really from, like, that's just, it's such a, like, that's when it really hit me, like everyone grows up with this mentality that like they're superior in some way because, whether they were born there, whether they just look different or they just speak different. Like, it's just such a huge class divide that comes from this idea that, like, if they're coming in from whether, and it's like mainly anyone who's, from India, Bangladesh, or sometimes even the Philippines, like they just come in and they see them with such a inferior and terrible light, and it's really like it really hits you. So after I had that conversation, I realized like this is not like that's when I start like actively like telling them, you know, when you say these, like that's wrong, and then there's the whole argument of why is it wrong? It's my opinion.
Right.
This is a choice,
Right.
and it's just so I think that's like one of the biggest like wake up calls. It's like when you have a conversation with someone who I found like very sensible. Like she lived in the States for a while, and so I thought like, you know, she wouldn't have that kind of, I'm sad to say, like that stuck Arab mentality that comes from like, you know, other countries like around in the Middle East. And so I would have thought that she would come in with a different perspective that's a little more, you know, aware and conscious of, but you know, it's kind of a shock. It's kind of my
Long ways to
experience.
go, I guess. Yeah.
You know, I can 100% relate to that. I grew up in the States, and so obviously when you're younger, you're not very aware of these type of things because as a kid, obviously your parents shelter you, and I was also homeschooled. So I was like super, super sheltered, and like all of my friends were like my, you know, parents' friends' children. And my parents were obviously very, you know, cognizant of the type of people that we were surrounded by. And so I never really understood, or I was never really exposed to these type of things until I actually moved to Qatar when I was around 11 years old. And it's really interesting because, you know, when my dad told me, oh, we're going to move to like a Muslim country. And I was like, at first I was like super wary. I was like, oh, we have to move again. Like, I don't want to move. And then I started thinking, I was just like, oh my God, you know what? It would be so cool to live in a country where everyone is Muslim. Like, that would just be so amazing. And then you go and it hit me. I think that like going into the airport was the first time I kind of like sensed something was just not okay. And you can kind of tell from like, you know, all of the blue collar workers, you can tell like, you know, where they were from, and you can kind of tell like who got the white collar jobs and who got the blue collar jobs. And like as a kid you would think that like kids don't notice these things, but they do. And then once I got into school, and like you'd have like conversations with your classmates, and they'd say like stuff similar to what Zain was talking about, and you know, you would argue with them and they would be like, why do you care? Like, they literally made the choice to be here. And I'm just like, what do you mean, why do I care? Again, like with my, you know, the vision that I had, you know, that I was going to live in a Muslim country, you know, when people would say, oh, this is the choice that they made, whether they live or whether they live or they don't, it's their choice. And I'm just like, okay, but this isn't like what our values teach us, right? And so, yeah, it was like, it just like took me completely off guard. And I feel like that kind of shaped my experience, you know, the 5 years that I lived there, because it's everywhere, and it's in every type of relationship that you have.
In high school, I had in grade 12 for one of my courses, world politics. I did really well in that course. Just throwing it out there. I'm kidding. My teacher, she graduated from York, did the teachers college, and then she was Somali. And I went to an Islamic school, so she was obviously a Muslim. And before she came to that school, she actually taught in Qatar for I think a year or 2 years. And she was Somali hijabi, right? And she was talking about how as a teacher, people would not respect her at all, and specifically because she was like dark skinned, right? And even though, like Randa said, you're in a Muslim country, and like they're like the Arab kids, like their moms are wearing hijabs, like you go out there, everyone's wearing abayas. It's just that this woman was the exact same as them, minus the skin color, right? It was something that she had literally no control over, but the way she was treated was completely different. She was like, the students were extremely rude. They were so stuck up. They would like, you know, because they come from like rich families, a lot of the time they're just like, they think you're like worthless almost. And like, it's almost as if that like, why are you my teacher? Like, why do I have to learn from you when I could be getting like a better education somewhere else? And I'm like, and I was so pissed because I'm like, you know, people from North America, especially when they go to the Middle East as teachers, they're looked at like, whoa, like, you know, they're like at a next level, they're super knowledgeable, they're gonna bring so much to the table. But it was just that like her skin color was different, and all of that was just thrown out the window. And the reason I brought that up was because I wanted to ask Randa, like in Qatar, like you grew up with, and you were a student there. From a student perspective, what was kind of going through like these people's minds, because they are at the end of the day ignorant, and it's partially not their fault because they're kids, but you know, it's like I wanted to hear that.
Yeah, I remember it's funny that you brought up, you know, the story of the teacher. I don't even like know where to start, like how to tell you. Like we would be sitting in class and a lot of our teachers were brown. And so like in biology class, for example, and the teacher would be up there and she's explaining a concept, and then all the Arab kids would just be sitting there and like talking in Arabic about how like, oh, why should we listen to this teacher? Like, what does she know? Like, why? Like, oh, like she's not qualified to be teaching us. And then, you know, the teacher would tell them, oh, like you need to be quiet and you need to pay attention, and then they would talk back to her in Arabic, you know, as a way to kind of just like make fun of her. And I'm just like, are you guys kidding? Like, come on. But yeah, and it was like it was like that constantly and consistently. It was always like that. And like, so I have two younger brothers. And so my youngest brother, when we moved to Qatar, he got into elementary school. So he wasn't homeschooled like us. He didn't grow up, you know, in a household where all of the things you were taught, all of the values and everything came primarily from your parents. You know, he went to school. And so like he would come home sometimes and he would say some like super absurd things, like the same type of things that the kids in my class would say. And my mom would be like, hold up, I never taught you that. Take that back right now. And so
Not
yeah,
in this household, yeah.
But yeah, no, it was everywhere.
What about you, Maryam?
So my experience with racism, like in Saudi, like you know, I've lived in Saudi pretty much for majority of my entire life, and yeah, my experience with racism has probably been pretty bad. I remember when I was 6 years old, I used to go to this like Quran school, and like this Quran school was like pretty much like an all girls school, and like it was all like Saudi girls. And I remember I was 6, and you know my parents couldn't find like a proper Quran school, so they're like, oh, this is good for you, whatever, blah blah blah. So I was like, okay, cool. So I remember every single day I would go to school, and these girls would they would look at me really weird sometimes. They'd be like, oh, what is this girl like doing here? Like, who is she? Like, why didn't she like speak Arabic? Like, what is this language she's speaking? Like, I couldn't speak Arabic at that time. I spoke like English. So like it was like another factor was that like, you know, it was really hard to communicate back and forth between like, you know, all these Arabic speaking people and then like me. So like aside from the fact that I spoke English, I also happened to be like a Black person. So they didn't really, I think that's something that didn't really sit well with them, because I remember like every single day I would go to school like on a bus and everything, and they would straight up like beat me up on the bus, and just because I was like different from them. Sometimes they would pretty much beat me unconscious, and I would like literally pass out at the back of the bus, and then the bus driver would have to come and wake me up, and then like he's like, you got to go to class and whatever, and then I would go to class for like a couple hours, 3 hours, like learn Quran, come back on the bus, and then endure the same thing, and then I would be home and everything like that. So that was probably the first act of like anti-Black racism that I've ever experienced in my entire life. And although like it was as gruesome, I know like it's pretty gruesome what I had to experience as a 6-year-old, but I think it's also like shaped the way the way how I would like approach people, and like how I would be seen as people. Like I didn't think I would have to consider myself as different from other people, but because of this experience, I was like, at only 6 years old, it like really opened my eyes to like, oh, I'm a different, like, despite the fact that I'm in a Muslim country, I'm always going to be different from these people. They're always going to see themselves as superior over me, and I don't think I can't change that. And then, yeah, pretty much after, like, it didn't get as, like, the racism didn't get as bad after that whole experience and when I was 6. But, like, you know, when I was in middle school, like, elementary school, middle school, high school, like, I would get, like, you know, it was like racial microaggressions, right? So they'd be like, oh, strong Black woman, like, girl, why you always angry? What's wrong with your face? Like, girl, like your lips like take up half the size of half of your face and everything. And then of course like the N word, Arbid. So I pretty much had to like endure all that throughout my whole time in Saudi. And I think the thing that really bothered me the most was that the fact that I couldn't even try to defend myself, because if I did, like it was literally like the whole Arab community that would like come to defend that one person, person that's like bullying you or oppressing you. Like not even the whole Arab community, like all of Saudi would pretty much back this one person up, and then like for like I would be alone, like no one would be there to like defend me, despite the fact that I was the one being bullied and oppressed for. And like also back to like the migrant workers thing, the people that come from like India, Pakistan, like Bangladesh, like to come and like work, they're like I know like I like that same the same treatment also happened in Saudi as well. And I don't know, I just think like Arabs, like this has been like embedded in the Arab culture for so long, right? So I think that Arabs would always see themselves as superior to like pretty much any other skin color. They pretty much see like brown people and Black people and even like Filipino and like East Asian people. They would always see them like as below them because they're not. And I think it's because of two things. I think because Arabs, like they tend to be like lighter skin, so they compare themselves to like the people of the West, pretty much, like. And then also the fact that like the Quran is written in Arabic as well too, so it's pretty much, it's really easy for them to like read it because like Arabic is their native tongue. So I feel like they have this idea that they sorry, I just lost my train of thought. They have this idea that they are the like superior, like they're superior in Islam, which is completely wrong, right?
Like the chosen race kind of concept, like.
Pardon? Sorry.
Like is it like, are you referring more to like them being like the chosen like people because like the Prophet Muhammad was also like Arab and like all the Sahabas are from there? Like, are you referring like to that mentality?
Yeah, like that mentality as well, and the fact that like the Quran was written in Arabic, so they're just like, oh, it was clearly meant for us. When like no, it's meant for like all Muslims, right? Yeah. Like regardless of your race. So why are you being so like arrogant and like where's this pride coming from? Just because like our Prophet was an Arab does not mean that you're like above everyone else. Like Musa was also Black too. He's the most mentioned man in the Quran. So yeah, like where is this coming from?
It's really interesting. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, it's okay. Go ahead.
I just want to say, like, it's really good that you brought up the fact that there's a lot of like this mentality that they want to be like the people in the West, like so they value like more. It's literally embedded like colonialism that they are putting out into like back into that society. Like they're really recycling. I am Arab and I grew up like I'm from Jordan and I literally saw it growing up where, for example, I'd have me and my sisters being compared based on like who's fairer, and then they would be like, oh, like she's prettier because she's fair. And at the time, like you wouldn't even like, if you hear it like all the time, it doesn't even click until later. It's like, what does that even mean? But then you look at how they even plan their events, how they behave, how they act, like the movies that they choose. It's like they want to strive for what they think is more powerful. So not only are they embedding this sense, not only are we, like, I can't like say they as if I'm not Arab, like not only are like Arabs trying to like kind of like perceive that like you said, like we speak Arabic, it's the language of the Quran, like must mean that it's more superior than other languages, and by definition Arabs are the ones who speak Arabic, so we're the more superior. They're also reaching for that other external superiority of being as same as the colonizer, like in
and you can't have both.
Exactly.
Choose your battles. Yeah,
exactly. and being like, I like, for example, Syria was colonized by like France, for example. So when you speak to people from Syria, like you get a lot of the language in there, and then at the same time you get them seeing that like people in France are more like they're more powerful, they're more like, you know, it's always going to be that they're going to strive for something that they assume is better, but while they're doing that, they're literally breaking down the core of our morals and our ethics of being, first of all, if you're going to find superiority in deen, in Islam, I practice it. Like, you know, it's beyond just the language, it's you know, so practice it here before you try to assume that there's more power elsewhere, because you're literally colonized into thinking that, you know, like into thinking that entire new concept. So it's a really, like, I think the 2 points that you mentioned are like spot on, that they assume that to be more superior you have to aim for a certain look, a certain, you know, even like type of behavior has to be the same. You know, you always see these movies about, you know, whether it's like the American dream and it's just chasing money or finding that like success in a large business, no matter how you get there. And you actually see it, like when you talk to, like when I talk to family members, like their goal is to get there, and they will ignore the fact that it comes with a lot of vices, it comes with a lot of issues, it comes with a lot of racism, a lot of classism, like, you know. So it's really, really, it's sad. It's an interesting concept to like really look into and try to dissect. It's also really sad.
I just wanted to say, like, when I was kind of like reading about this a little bit, one of the concepts that came across was like pan-Arabism, which is like, you know, like the north of Africa, like, you know, Tunisia, Morocco, Egypt, so on and so forth, along with the Middle East, is considered like one like identity. And what was interesting was Egypt is actually one of the more powerful states because they're just like a lot bigger, and if I remember correctly, like they're resource rich as well. And so when this whole like pan-Arabism thing was being made, like Egypt was like a focal point in this because they're so powerful, right? And I forget the name of that leader for Egypt. If I remember correctly, it was Egypt, but a lot of his philosophies, not a lot, but there was parts of his philosophies where when you dissect it, it actually mimicked the race superiority that Hitler was trying to implement in Germany. And so that was just like a really like hit home kind of point. When I read that, I was like, oh, yeah. Oh, damn, like this is, you know, like this is serious, because when you internalize that and think about it, you're like, yeah, like I could totally see this. Like this makes a lot more sense. Obviously, it's not to this extent, and you know, like you're not going and like starting up concentration camps and stuff, at least to my knowledge, but there are subtle instances of that, and it was just like really interesting to see that philosophy being embedded and really washing out what we're supposed to be teaching, which is like Islam. So yeah, that was a really
You know what?
interesting.
Even if it's not like actual, like, you know, in the concept of concentration camps, when you dehumanize people and put them in living accommodation that literally take away from their dignity as people, like you are aiming for that. You're just, you know, doing it within the law. So it's not even it's not even completely canceled. Like even if you have a lot of and I remember this very clearly from when I was in the Emirates. So it was a norm to have, and I think it's also very common in all Middle East countries to have, whether it's a nanny or just someone to come in for the day. You know, it was normal. And the stories that you would hear and the way people would justify their actions to those people working in their homes is atrocious. Is absolutely like you would honestly, and you would see it all over like social media, the way that they treat them. It's either like she's got to sit at a different table to eat, or she can't, like she's living in a closet in the home that literally
sometimes they even eat the leftovers of what the family has.
It's
and like
what
all
they
the
have as
abuse
for dinner.
stories as well that never make it to news outlets because everything's just, you know, so censored.
Exactly. So it's like, even if it's not an official kind of, you know, all of this is happening and it's illegal, like they're doing it with the bounds of the law, but they're not doing it, you know, in the bounds of being human beings. Like it's absolutely atrocious, and people just look past that, again, with the whole concept of, well, they chose to come here and they don't like it, they can go. Really?
Yeah.
Really?
How else are they gonna provide for their families? You know,
Honestly,
like
honestly.
Exactly. Yeah. And when
Go ahead.
and when you bring up these conversations with them, they're just like, oh, like, are you trying to compare the racism that we have here to like the racism in the West? No one's dying here. And I'm just like, first of all, you guys don't know that because your news doesn't cover it. But second of all, it doesn't need to require people dying for it to be valid and legitimate.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So, kind of commenting on the news outlet piece. So again, like when I was just researching about this, if I'm mistaken, please correct me, Randa, because I'm talking about Sudan here. But one of the things that highlighted the things that were happening in Sudan was Al Jazeera. And Al Jazeera covered it because they're private and they're not linked to any particular like country. And so when that news finally got out and people were finally learning about it, being educated, and there was awareness being done, then people start to realize like, oh, like, whoa, this is crazy, or what's going on. And like there was literally like a revolution or two revolutions that happened in Sudan. I forgot what the city was. I think
There's Darfur and then there's
yeah,
Khartoum. Yeah,
there you
both of
go,
them.
both of them. And so
You know,
yeah, I was just gonna comment on like the power of media, and that's why social media nowadays is so interesting and so powerful, because literally like the entire Black Lives Matter movement was done through like Instagram. Not like literally, but a lot of the advocacy was done through Instagram, and that's not
especially
something
during
that,
the pandemic.
so
And you know, that censorship actually has a lot to do with why people stay the way that they are, because a lot of times they will get deported over things that they post. So for you to support, like for you to acknowledge that a country is built on systemic racism and blatant racism, you are putting you and your family at risk of being deported. And so a lot of people were like, oh, it's kind of, at this point they're being like, the government's literally saying it's either you or them, you know, it's no longer. So it's just like, to add on to your point, it really does have a huge component in why people don't change.
Even in Saudi, like anytime someone tried to bring up like systemic racism or like anything wrong with the government in any way, we would always have to like shut them up, because like you don't know if they're like they have government cameras.
Yeah.
Like we don't know if they're, like you know, we don't know who's like a spy, who's like spying for the government, you know.
Yeah,
so,
and
like,
it's a legitimate concern. People legitimately lose their jobs and have to completely like take out their roots from the country and go somewhere else. And a lot of times, like especially people who aren't actually Saudi Arabian, like who aren't local to the country, they most of the time, like they've come to the country seeking refuge, whether it's like, I know for example in Dubai, like it was a lot of Palestinians, a lot of Lebanese, and they left because of war, because of they just and so if they lose that, it's like, where are they gonna go? So it's just kind of like, it's not worth it.
Yeah, no, 100%. It's like, and I feel like there's like a certain type of fragility surrounding, you know, this entire discussion. Like people get super, like if you ever try to bring up this type of conversation with like anyone who's Arab, they get like super like offensive. Are you calling me racist? Like I didn't do anything. Like why are you calling me racist? And I'm just like, calm down. Like,
and you know the thing, when you like call them out and whatever, they're just like, oh, my people in Palestine are being like oppressed too. Like don't I also feel like, am I also not oppressed? I'm like,
and they turn it into like the Struggle Olympics type thing.
Honestly.
Like they're literally like, they're like, them and their people, they're literally causing oppression to like others, and then they're just like, they turn it back on themselves. They're like, oh, but like in Palestine, this and this and this is happening. Like no one's saying that whatever is happening in Palestine is like, you know, they're not ignoring Palestine. Like from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free, right? But like you also have to like be aware. You also have to be aware of like, you know, the stuff that you are saying and the stuff that you're doing and how you're treating people, because whether you like it or not, one day it's just gonna bite you back in the butt, and it's gonna hurt. So
And so all of that being said, you know, what advice would you want to give to people who are, you know, our age or maybe a bit older, about how to kind of, you know, stop the perpetuation of, you know, these types of beliefs? And like slowly but surely kind of try to eliminate these things from our communities?
Honestly, as someone who, again, like being there at a young age, I unfortunately like I was partaking in a lot and saying a lot of things that were wrong, or acting ways that are not right. And for me to have grown out of it, I had to acknowledge it first. I had to acknowledge that a lot of the things, like even if they come from distant family members who, even if they don't live with them, you trust them, like you kind of blindly just, you love them. They can't do wrong. They can't be imperfect. Teachers you look up to, they can't be imperfect. But then the first step to making sure that you are no longer kind of putting yourself back into this toxic cycle and making other people feel like all types of terrible things, you need to acknowledge that you have grown up with that. You have partaken in it in some way. Like you do have a privilege. You do have this idea in the back of your head that's been literally like enforced into you. Like as an Arab, like it's been enforced many ways. And so for you to kind of like, for me as an Arab to step out of that and realize I need to first acknowledge that, hey, like I've done this, I've heard this, I've seen this. I don't want to continue this terrible cycle. Like I want to stop it. It's going to stop with me. And I think that's like the first step of kind of teaching yourself out and just acknowledging like you made mistakes, you learn, you don't like.
Exactly.
I read this one thing where it's like, you can't get blamed for like not knowing your mistake, but it's like you get blamed for repeating the mistake.
Exactly. Yeah.
And like, that's what I think is very true.
Like people think there's something wrong with like acknowledging your mistakes and like admitting that you were wrong, but it's totally okay for you to be like, you know what, I was wrong, and to take a step back and just fix it. People are always afraid of like getting canceled, but the reality is most people aren't looking to cancel you. People are just looking to have the conversation in order to kind of stop, these repeated and harmful behaviors. And I just wanted to kind of like touch on, it's really difficult to have these conversations, especially when you're in a position where you're on the receiving end of the prejudice. It's kind of difficult for you to step out and be like, this is not okay and you need to stop. It's important for us. I know, as someone with like white skin, I have a privilege, and it's important for me to step out and to call people out when I see them, saying wrong things. But also I think, for people on the receiving end of the prejudice, it's important that, don't stick around especially because I feel like a lot of people stick around with their friends and even like not call out their family members because they're kind of afraid of losing that type of relationship. Don't call it out, say it like it is. You're going to be called angry, you're going to be called aggressive. Don't let it get to you. Just it's important to be surrounded by people who emulate the same type of values that you have.
Yeah, I wanted to build off of what Randa said. So Zain spoke, and she said the first step you have to do is acknowledge it, and I think the second step is what Randa was talking about, is that you actually educating other people and raising awareness about it. Like I don't have an African descent. I'm brown, and I know a lot of brown people are racist, and it is sadly kind of the way it is. And I have been there so many times where there's been a conversation with extended family and relatives, and they're just grown up so like uneducated or on whatever it may be. And I was like this close to like saying something, but then like I didn't, right? And I swear like those are the times that I regret it the most. And I'm like, you know what? Like that's it. Like next time it happens, I'm gonna call it out, because sadly the realization was that like you either will face this now, or on the day of judgment you're gonna be standing and answering on why you didn't do it. So it's like weighing the two options. It's like, sure, whatever, even if that cancel thing happens, like what are you gonna do, not feed me on Eid? Like whatever, I don't care. Right? Like my mom makes plenty of good food, but it was just like, you actually, it's gonna suck, trust me. Like I've been through it, and it's like you're gonna feel your throat swell up, and you're gonna be like, the words won't even come to you. But just like saying something, you don't have to go on a rant or an argument. Just be like, hey, like what you said, I don't think that's right. And if they want to continue the conversation, then fine. But at least what I'll do is it'll derail the conversation from that topic, and they will stop that. So easier said than done, obviously, but I think that's a very important first step. Something that I myself haven't done yet, and I'm really looking forward to. I'm not looking forward to it happening, but I'm hoping that if / when it does happen, I can do that.
Because I was like, I'm looking forward to canceling people.
Go under the cancel button. You're cancel. You're cancel.
It's like Staples.
Yeah.
That was easy.
I also think it's really like what you said about like how Allah's gonna ask you like on the day of judgment, like why did you stop this or whatever. Like even in this dunya, like when you have later down in the future when you have kids and they ask you like what did you do to like stop like racism and like all the stuff that's happening, and like if you don't have anything to say, then like you should be ashamed of yourself. You know, we need to like, and like especially with my experience, like when people would bully me and you know all that stuff, a lot of like brown, like not brown, brown people and like other people, they wouldn't say anything. They were just like, oh, like this is not my fight, this is this is not my business, like this is a you problem, like I don't want to like fall into this like pit or whatever. And I'm like, no, like this is everyone's fight. This is not like my fight or like some random dude's fight. This is everyone's fight. We need to like step out of our comfort zone and like, you know, address these problems and like call people out. And like even if they get all their friends to like, you know, attack you, whatever, like at least they're like, you're doing the right thing and you're trying and you're stepping in the direction where, you know, we can have like progressive change through like, you know, over time. And then hopefully when we have like, you know, our children's generation and everything like that, we like this stuff won't be as like common, you know. They'll hopefully like eliminate it.
Especially now that there's a lot more attention going on about like censorship and how terrible it could be. I think now people are realizing that they've been robbed from free thinking, like just like very unconsciously, like being robbed of free thinking and being able to actually step out of what's norm. And then hopefully like that kind of growth will build into actually looking at other resources. Like I know, unfortunately, like a lot of times when people assume that they're doing something right towards activism, like there was this Arab blogger or makeup artist who decided that in order for her to combat the idea of anti-Black racism in her country, she is going to do blackface as part of her makeup routine. And it's like, what? It's kind of like, but then see, like, okay, so she did that mistake, she had the whatever good intent, people went and educated her in the comments. They were like, you know, this is not doing what you think it is, like it really isn't. And instead of saying, you know what, you're right, I made a mistake, homegirl was like, no, you don't understand. And it's like,
and she didn't want to take it down either, right?
Yeah. And it's like people who you're literally attempting to advocate and fight for are telling you this ain't it. And you're like, nah, this is it. Like this is where it's big. Like, you know, you can't let your ego come in the way. And I think there's a lot of, especially in Arabs, like there's a lot of ego and it's gotta get broken down. Like you cannot live with ego. You cannot, for many reasons, and this is one huge part of it.
Yeah.
This is why you don't do makeup.
Oh my god. And like, as you know, as people with privilege, like I'm an Arab passing like African individual, like it's not fair. Like, you know how Maryam was like, oh, people would tell her, oh, it's like your fight, right? But the reality is we are the perpetrators of this type of abuse and these types of behaviors. And so change starts with us, not with her, right? So if we don't stop these actions and we don't educate people and we don't educate ourselves, then there's no way this is going to end. Exactly. Faizan and I wanted to end it, you know, on a lighter note. And this was Faizan's idea. So guys, please don't come at me. But Faizan was like, oh, we should talk.
Great. What are you talking about?
We should talk. I was like, you're going to catch them off guard and they're going to be like, what even is this? But he was just like, is there a type of food that you really enjoyed as a kid that you would not mind having like right now?
It was like food that you grew up, because I think all of us, like we grew up in a different country, or like we've been like in and out of like different countries. So is there something you grew up eating or like really liking that you don't have a lot of now, but like you kind of crave sometimes? You're like, oh, I wish I had that, or I wish I had that. I can start if you want. Like for me,
go for it.
it's always manakish. Like, oh man, I grew up eating that.
Yeah.
And oh man, if I can go to like one Middle Eastern country, Lebanon, 100%. I don't even know if that's Middle Eastern or not, but like their
100%.
food,
Yeah.
It is very Middle Eastern.
man,
Yeah.
their food is
This is
so
as
good,
Middle Eastern as you get.
Yeah.
man.
Oh
But
yeah. It's just done differently there. You can't get it the same anywhere
Mhm.
else.
and it's like
Anybody
the
else
ones that are here, it's not as authentic, and they overprice it like crazy. And it's just like, no, like, what are you doing? Like, I used to be in Dubai. I used to get like 3 or 4 for like 10 dirhams, and that's like $2
Yeah.
or $3. And over here, like one is for like $8. I'm like, well, what are you on, bro? Like, chill. What kind of mincemeat
Yeah.
are you doing? Is I'm not eating a freaking goat from Jannah. Like, chill.
You know what, Faizan? That was not going to be my answer, but once you said Manaish, I like it just like triggered a
Like I literally see it in my head
memory.
right now.
So when we were kids, so I grew up like most of my childhood was like in California, and there's like a huge Arab community there. So basically in California, there's like a huge Arab community, and so there would be like lots of Manaish stores and we like or restaurants, and so we like tried everything, and they were never that great. It's just like knockoff Manaish. So we finally found this one restaurant. It was like next to a halal meat store that we would like frequent. And I remember every time my mom would go and like she would leave us in the car, like go grab her halal meat and come back, and we'd be like, "Mama, we're so hungry. Like we're so hungry," because we wanted the Manaish.
That's so cute. I remember it was like a family thing. It's always been like a family trip, you know, on a Friday morning before everyone goes to prayer. You go like at 9 a.m. to the Manaish store and you get all kinds of variations. What about you, Maryam?
My favorite food would probably have to be what kind of, you know, like the grape, the grape wine leaves. Like, man, I used to like go to the supermarket and just like get those ones that were like 20 or more in a like in a can.
Yeah.
And like I would go home, I would sit on the couch, and I'll literally eat all of it in one sitting. My mom would get so mad. She's like, "You're gonna get fat, Miriam. Relax."
Oh my god, it's funny because even in the cans back there, like they taste better than the cans in here. Like it's just it's so different. It's really so weird, different. Yeah. I'm gonna be a little less healthy. It's
what's in those
rice and
rice.
Rice and meat sometimes, or rice and veggies, depends on how you do it. I don't want to join. I agree with everyone, but I really want to like kind of branch it off a little bit. There were I missed the Tutti Frutti gummies and the almond chips. I don't know if any of you guys.
Wait, which chips? Which chips?
Oh the almond chips.
Yeah,
the orange.
So good.
They're like red and or like they're like blue and orange almost, and like. I don't know how many spices were coated on those chips, right? But it was fire.
It was bomb.
And those Tutti Fruttis, and I feel like to kind of like top off a very healthy meal, you'd have an ornament C drink. You know that? Oh my god, I don't even remember what it was. It was just called ornament C. Anybody who just remembers that, please like, no. Okay, well, all of you have to search it up and you gotta see it because I know you will remember it the second you see it. You're gonna be like, what? That's what it was. It's so all these three things were like,
you know, the one drink I remember from the Emirates was Lebanon Up.
Oh yeah,
that was good, man. That was good.
That was like my go-to drink in Ramadan. It was just like chug down some Lebanon.
And it would dehydrate you so much where you're like, it's so good.
Yeah.
So it's worth it. It's worth it. This is a really fruitful conversation. I hope a lot more people are now pushed into talking about these things the way that we are.
Inshallah. And thank you guys for being so open and for having this conversation. And
bro, I stripped myself raw, man. I never tell that story to people. When I was 6 years old, I was like,
thank you so much.
Thank you.
I can't imagine how hard it could be. So thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. It's really like, and I hope anybody who's listening who still has that kind of like mentality to kind of just take a step back. Like you were 6 years old. Like you were 6 years old. Like that is not like, that is on a lot of levels of unacceptable. And for anybody who thinks this is not their fight, like this is everyone's fight. Like you can't pick and choose how it's affecting other humans as young as 6 years old. So
honestly, the one thing I still can't get over is that, like, literally, I think this is the epitome of the education that needs to be done, but you are beating up a child for their skin color before going and memorizing Quran. Just like let that sink in for a second. Like,
and I think the worst part is like the kids that were beating you up, where they were also 6 years old, right? 6 years, like
They were older.
Oh my god.
were they around your same age?
Oh my god.
I think they were teens actually.
And like
14,
even
15.
then, like this, it means this behavior is the type of thing that they get, you know, from their parents, like stuff that is taught to them from their household, and that's so problematic.
Wow. SubhanAllah, how people can just like, how could I? Okay, we are the future, and we are going to stop.
Inshallah.
We're going to stop this.
all right, guys, thank you for tuning in to this episode. We really hope you learned something from it, and we hope you can take something away. There's a lot of work that needs to be done with respect to having conversations and changing up our own mentality. And we obviously ended up on a little bit of a lighter note by talking about food. So if anyone goes to the Middle East, try out all of those things that we mentioned. And and I think that's about it. We hope you guys join us on the next one, and we're hoping to have a lot more conversations about different taboo topics that aren't really talked about, especially within the Muslim community. So we hope you guys enjoy, and we'll see you in the next one. See ya.
Alaikum.
Bye.